Though 12,000 people had been killed, radiation poisoned the area and atmosphere, and Night City had officially been made inhabitable after the bombing of the Arasaka headquarters. Many citizens were unaffected by the situation and decided to stay. The heavy amounts of cyberware and radioactive filters within people's augmented bodies meant that they could continue their lives within the city. Unfortunately, the bombing meant that a large part of the city's housing had been destroyed, forcing even more people out into the streets, the suburbs, and the edge of the city, adding to both crime and homelessness. However, to put things into perspective against the rest of the world, at this point in history, even after the Depression, severe homelessness, extreme violence, and crippling destruction from a nuclear bomb, Night City was statistically still better off than other cities, such as Rio, Busan, or Hong Kong. Thousands of people moved away from the city after its destruction. However, the remaining civilians found a surreal bond in their desperate survival, the unity to create shelters, and the sharing of available food and water. In 2025, in the fallout of the nuclear explosion, Arasaka themselves would be blamed for the attack on Night City. This came through allegations of Elizabeth Kress, the president of the new United States and former CEO of Militech. Within hours of the disaster, Kress had nationalized Militech and put them under control of the United States military. Then, through the heavy use of her media sources and intense propaganda, she propagated that the Arasaka Corporation had orchestrated a false flag attack to stop Militech from seizing the American headquarters of Arasaka. Kress used the precision to paint the Arasaka Corporation as an evil foreign mech corporation run by a madman who had destroyed an American city simply to pursue personal power. This resulted in Arasaka and its members being declared terrorists, while the entire organization had all grounds for operating on American soil revoked before being driven out of the country. Eyeing a possibility for bringing the free state of Northern California back under the control of NUSA, President Kress deemed Night City unsalvageable and offered sanctuary to any citizen or refugee of the state. However, this would partially fail, and while Northern California would surrender some control, staying a semi-autonomous state, Night City would resist and remain a free city, struggling in its contaminated and ravaged remains. By 2035, after 12 years of struggling and hardship, the rebuilding of Night City would finally commence. Facing a serious problem with homelessness, more than 2 million people being left affected either directly by the explosion of the nuclear bomb or indirectly due to floodings as the foundation of the city, built on fill and sand, would crumble, leaving structures underwater, the government of Night City seemed unable to mediate the situation. While shantytowns made from tents were assembled in the smaller areas surrounding the greater Night City, these improvised and overcrowded neighborhoods housed but a fraction of the desperate refugees who now subsided in terrible living conditions. Desperate for help, the government and the citizens of Night City sought assistance from the Aldecaldos clan, one of the largest nomad groups in North America. The Aldecaldos and their allies of the Stormtake Corporation had immense experience in city rebuilding from a former Chicago project and were equipped to construct extensive temporary housing from simple shipping containers before moving on to more sophisticated housing out of former Crete modules. However, before any work could be done, the ground needed to be cleared to put up these rudimentary structures. While most of the central corporate zone had been destroyed, including government buildings, the wreckage was far too vast to dig up and excavate to distant landfills. And because of that, the area had to be cleared out with either bulldozers or abandoned battle tanks, which sought to simply shove the debris into the bay. The radioactive crater at Ground Zero was also cleaned, with casualties rate kept to a minimum, though no public numbers were ever provided by Night Corp, making these low casualty claims dubious at best. As major parts of the city had already been leveled in the brutal war between the corporations, clearing out the remains proved an easier task than initially suspected, and from these remains and wreckages, a new fill would be created from which the new mega buildings would rise once again, ready to challenge the smog-filled skies that loomed above. However, while the buildings going back up were towering over the city below, the internal parts of the city saw its fair share of struggles. After the outbreak of several violent zoonotic diseases, the Avian Extermination Act was passed by the city government, effectively eliminating all birds within an 18-mile radius of city limits. And while personal pets could be kept under strict supervision, this would eventually lead to the majority of animal wildlife perishing within North California. The rebuilding of Night City didn't just create a strong foundation for the city itself, it also brought together its population and cemented the citizens' perception and stance on their independence. Having been abandoned by the president, forced to rebuild and save themselves from starvation, radiation, and homelessness, the citizens of Night City had no intentions of ever going back under the rule of the NUSA. Simultaneously, public opinion would slowly form that the NUSA had used the Arasaka Corporation as a scapegoat for the nuclear detonation solely for the intention of slandering the megacorporation's reputation. And finally, around 2040, this truth would finally be unveiled. Trace Santiago, a young independent journalist, managed to obtain information about the events of 2023, back when the nuclear bomb was detonated, publishing a story called The Big Lie, where the deception created by President Chris was exposed. This drove Night City to ally itself with the Arasaka Corporation rather than the United States, despite many citizens being under the impression that the Arasakas were responsible for the attack in one way or another. At the same time, the city established trading agreements with the EEC, the European Economic Community, as well as the Soviet Union, further cementing the foundation of Night City's independence and establishing the contempt they had for the NUSA as they continued to rebuild. This strenuous process of reconstructing Night City would last until 2069. However, these decisions did not sit well with the US government, determined to bring the Free States to heel by federalizing them under the pretense of strengthening the nation. The NUSA proposed a federal rule, effectively eliminating all autonomous states. This would, of course, be rejected by every single autonomous state, which led to the only possible outcome: armed conflict. And in the aftermath of the NUSA's proposal, followed what came to be known as the Unification War. As part of the Free State of Northern California, Night City wanted to remain neutral in the conflict. Northern California, known as NorCal, had allied with the rest of the Free States, while Southern California, referred to as SoCal, had allied with the NUSA. This put Night City in the crossfire as it found itself smack dead in the middle of two warring states. Holding their breath as the war escalated, the citizens of Night City watched the troops of NUSA advance on the city in the early start of 2070. Anxiously waiting for the federal troops to invade the city, the citizens of Night City were saved by the most unexpected of allies. A supercarrier from the Arasaka Corporation would dock in the Del Coronado Bay, ready to protect the city. Unable to financially sustain a conflict with the Arasaka Corporation over an extended period of time, the NUSA decided to retreat and abandon the state. The population of Night City could finally give out a sigh of relief as the Treaty of Unification was signed, avoiding yet another global crisis and effectively ending the war for good. The treaty rededicated Night City as an international autonomous free city without having to answer to the governance and laws of North California or the NUSA, obtaining the official title of Free City. However, this title came with a price, as the megacorporations saw this as their opportunity to pour vast amounts of money into this potential future investment, hoping to gain a foothold on the North American West Coast. And this was further cemented as the newly elected mayor, Lucius Ryan, gave Arasaka a seat on the city council and allowed them to build their new American headquarters in the downtown area, ironically on the exact same site where their original office had been destroyed in 2023. Night City was growing, but the prosperity was not enjoyed by all. Arasaka would further increase its dominion over Night City and was not only able to take out several corporate rivals, but would also further cement their presence and establish their foothold in the city by building the impressive yet ominous Arasaka waterfront in Watson. In 2074, the 80th anniversary of Night City's founding would be celebrated. Hardship and struggle had plagued the city for the last 50 years, and while the citizens and the city itself had pulled through, establishing itself as a free and independent city, the ability to govern itself had led Night City down a one-way road from which there was no coming back. For while major corporations thrived within the city's increasing reach, capacity, and wealth, mercenaries, gangs, homelessness, and violence ran rampant in the streets, far below the prosperous offices. With the pavement painted red and blood, catching the neon light of relentless advertising on every corner, wall, and roof, Night City had pushed consumerism to the furthest echelon, stretching its grasp not just to money, but also through lives and souls. A place where the poor would suffer, the weak would be exploited, and the ruthless would govern. This led to Night City being deemed the worst place to live in the entirety of the NUSA. Ironically, Night City, the city of dreams, the beacon of hope, created by Richard Knight and built to save its population from crime, violence, poverty, and depression, was now considered a criminal utopia, harboring the wicked and soulless, and ruled by the merciless and unforgiving. A place where violence was now a currency, and one's inclination towards murder, corruption, and ruthlessness would take you as high as your Icarus wings could carry you in your hopes and aspirations to become a living legend. Hey there, Hazmat here. That concludes the story of Night City. If you enjoyed this episode and want to see more of Cyberpunk 2077, make sure to let me know in the comments below. As always, a big thanks goes out to the Hunters Lounge, specifically the exclusive Gitchy Boy, the exclusive Johnny Sevens, the VIPs, Corvo Bear Slayer, Derivative, Doc Powell, Gino Lucero, Goose, Hambone, Jiminel Bob, Corey Peterson, Michael Fornhill, Mordev Menace, Hein, Slip, Stas P. Aztec, Sunrise Phoenix, TJ Crane, Texas Toast, and the Wizard of Cobber. And of course, all the regulars. If you want to support me and the channel, consider signing up for the Harness Lounge either here on YouTube or on Patreon. Link is in the description below. And thank you all for watching. I'll see you in the next one.